Hi, my name's Tanya White, and today I want to speak in the Teshuva at this time about the idea of prayer, what prayer means, but not just in terms of asking God for things that we want, in terms of the transformation of self that happens when we come and encounter the divine. I want to begin by speaking about three different, very unrelated people. One of them is the COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg. The second is Sherry Mandel. And the third is someone called Matt Haig. Sheryl Sandberg, in her book Option B, describes the tragic circumstances of her husband's very early passing. Left with two children, she grapples with her circumstances. She grapples with her non ideal reality. And in her book, she says we all live some form of Option B, some form of existence that isn't exactly how we expect it to be. And the biggest question is how we build resilience from that adversity, how we move forward, how we enable post-traumatic growth. Sherry Mandel, the mother of Kobe, who was tragically and brutally murdered by Palestinian terrorists, in her book, The Blessings of a Broken Heart, speaks about the notion that she thought she would never, ever be able to get over the brokenness. She would never be able to get over the absolute terror, trauma, despair that she went through. And yet somehow she has managed to not fix, but to repair and to come and bring together all the pieces of her broken heart. Matt Haig, in his book Reasons to Stay Alive, grapples and expresses deeply the journey of someone who went through very severe and continues to suffer with very severe depression and anxiety. And in that book, he speaks about the fact that despite everything, he has chosen to be human. He has chosen to find the good in his existence, even though on some days it's almost one of the most difficult things to do. In many ways, all of them, all three of these people, and many, many others who have written some phenomenal books about their own adversarial situations, find ways to see the good, to see blessing. They find ways to paradigm shift, to look at the world differently. Being a human being means that at times we will face things that are not ideal. Life is fragmentary, it's part of our existence, it's complex. And the biggest question I want to ask today is how can we use prayer? How can we use tefillah, internal reckoning, introspection, to help us reframe our reality? Because as we know, and as Yeshayahu Leibovitz tells us, tefillah is not a kaspamat. In Hebrew, we say kaspamat. It's not a cash machine. You can't put something in to get something out. That's not the way tefillah works. In fact, tefillah is something far more complex than that. Tefillah is the time when we come face to face with God, but it's also the time when we come face to face with parts of ourselves that we don't want to face at other times. And especially on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's the time when we stand before God and we ask ourselves the tough questions. We open our ears to hearing God, and we open our hearts to grappling with points and within ourselves that we don't necessarily look at throughout the rest of the year. Today, I want to talk about two women who I believe exemplify the process of reframing and the power of prayer. Chana and Rachel, two women, both of whom cannot have children of their own, both of whom are grappling, are despairing, are at the brink of an absolute breakdown, and both of whom have a husband who says something to them that somehow triggers a change. Hannah has no children. She doesn't eat, doesn't drink. She is jealous of the second wife who has lots of children. And at one point, her husband turns around and says to her, "Don't worry, Hannah. You're more to me than 10 male children. You're more to me than 10 sons. It's enough." Hannah, at that moment, we see something shifts within her. What her husband says to her is that she must accept her fate. This is your fate. This is your reality. But don't worry. It's enough, says Elkanah. Don't worry. I don't need any more from you, and you don't need anything else because you're enough. And Hannah says, "No, I'm not. And it's not. I want something, and I am the only one who is going to be able to bring that about." She shatters the fatalistic outlook and she takes with a deep sense of agency. We see in the text, she stands up, she gets up, she eats, she drinks, she goes, she prays to God. And in that prayer, in the depth of her despair, is born an incredible agency, is born the ability to self-transcend. She says, I don't want this son just for me. I want this son to bring about the redemption of Am Yisrael, of the people of Israel. And her prayers are answered. Why? Because Chana has shifted the way she sees her reality. He says it's not fated to be a certain way. I want it to be different. Her story is a story of hope in the face of despair. She turns away from fate towards destiny, away from being passive towards taking agency. And she shows us that through her prayer, she hasn't only turned to God, but in many ways, she's also turned to herself. The turn to God is a turn to ourselves. She's affirmed the divine mandate that God gives to humans to take control of our reality and to find ways of improving and overcoming our given fate. Rachel, the prayer is different. It's not explicit in the same way that Hannah's prayer is. But she too has a moment of total crisis, and she turns round to her husband and says, he says to Yaakov, give me a child, if not, I am as if I am dead. What's the point in my living? What's the point in my existence? I have no purpose. Yaakov's response is crushing. And in fact, he's actually criticized by many of the commentators. But what I would say is that Yaakov, of all people, understood Rachel more than anyone and understood what she needed to hear at that moment. It sounds unsympathetic, but in it is the key to unlocking what happens immediately afterwards. He turns around and he says, Atachat Elohim Anochi Hashem mimech pri beten? Am I in the place of God that has prevented you from having children? What's Yaakov saying to Rachel? He's saying to Rachel that you have the wrong paradigm of relationship with God. It is based on the ancient idea of idol worship, where you manipulate the God to get what I want. A bit like what Shia Leibovitz says, like a cash machine, I put something in to get something out. And Rachel believed that because Yaakov was closer to God, he had more credit with God and therefore could ask God for something. And Yaakov says to Rachel, that's not the way my God works. My God works through relationship, through encounter, through dialogue, through covenant, not through putting something in to get something out. It's not a relationship of I-it, as Martin Buber says, where I come to the other as a means to the end. I see the other as an object of my desire. No, it's a relationship of I-thou. I see the other as a subject, as an end in and of itself. The very essence of the encounter with the other transforms me, changes my perspective and the way I see my reality. The encounter is what gives me the strength to change my given condition. And that's exactly what happens with Rachel. We see no explicit prayer, but in the very next verse, something has changed because she comes to Yaakov and she says, I'm giving you my handmaiden Bilhah, the Taled Arbaki, she will give birth, and through her, Ebaneh Gam Anochi Mimena, I will be built up, I will become a mother through her. This is the first case. Well, actually not the first case, but this is a very beautiful idea of surrogacy, whereby Rachel turns around and says, I'm going to be a surrogate mother. It may not be ideal. It's not option A. It's not the ideal. I would have preferred that I was a mother, that I became a mother. And maybe I'll still dream and hope that will be the case one day, says Rachel. But in the meantime, I'm choosing option B. I'm reframing my reality. Now, we don't see any explicit prayer and we don't see any mention of prayer until her son is born. And when her son is born, she says, Zanani Elohim v'gam shama b'koli. God judged me and also heard my voice. And therefore I called him done. What's she saying there? She's saying there are two aspects to reality. There is the fate. Danani Elohim, this is what God has judged me. This is what God has given to me. This is my judgment. This is my reality. But yet, Shama b'koli, and at the same time, he heard my voice. Not the voice of the I-it. Not that I give something to him, he gives something back. No. We have created a relationship in which I have now been able to reframe the way I look at God and reframe the way I look at my reality. I accept my fate. I accept the given conditions of my reality, says Rachel. but I also know I can change it by shifting my perspective. And that is exactly what she has done. Life is indeed fragmentary. It is full of non-ideal moments. It's infused with crisis, with moments of, of situations that we wouldn't necessarily choose. But the greatest challenge we have is how we face all of those things and still choose life, still choose hope and agency. How we turn to God in prayer, not to manipulate or control or barter even, but rather because we know that through tefillah, through prayer, we have a means of transcending the self. We have a means of transcending the reality that we've been given to find meaning, to find strength, to find hope. Our encounter with the divine means we are inspired beyond the immediacy of our own reality. And that allows us to take agency. It allows us to understand and to tap in to our covenantal role with God and to be able to think creatively outside the box, to think of ways to fix things for others, for ourselves, for the world around us, for our country, for our nation. We're able to accept the reality. Danani Elokim, God judged me. This is the reality. And at the same time, V'shama b'koli, to listen to God, to listen to what he's calling us to do, and to fight the reality all together, both acceptance and fighting against it, taking agency. That is what it is to be crowned with the dignity of God. I wish you and all your loved ones Shana Tova. It should be a good year. And please God, our tefillot should all be answered. Not always exactly in the way we may think they are, but by giving us the inspiration and the ability and the agency to reframe our reality and take control and perhaps bring about reality that we so desire.